November 5th. It is 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I am Ginny Farber, the chair of this 141 task force, and I'm calling this meeting to order. We are meeting remotely in a Zoom webinar format, and we are live on YouTube. The panelists today are the task force members, and I'm going to call the roll for attendance. So Russ Holden.
Present.
Jack Kadzik.
Here.
Suzanne Phillips. Phil.
Present.
Kayleen Rosado.
Here.
And John Janelle, our ex officio member, who is the conservation administrator.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Okay. So our first order of business today is to discuss the 141 Portanimicut Road on-site visit, which I think you all took independently. And hopefully it was helpful in reminding everyone of what the conditions are on site. I was not there. I had been down there about 2 weeks ago. Is there anything anyone would like to discuss about the site as it is?
Jenny, I apologize again, everyone, for not posting that, and like I should have. So if and I know you're going to talk about the site today, but if there is a need to meet as a group on site, just let me know today. We'll just try to reschedule that with everyone, probably in a similar fashion before our next meeting.
Well, let me ask, did everybody walk it today? Jack,
Yes.
did you walk it?
No, but I've walked it since our last time out there.
Okay, Kayleen lives across the street. Phil, did you get a chance to wander around?
Not really. I got there and met John Janelle, who said it was canceled, but I could go down another time.
Okay, yeah, it's open to the public, so which is, nice so that people can wander. But not much has changed. What I was hoping to do with the site visit was then frame some of the conversations that we've been having and try to get things moving. So having nothing more to say really about the on-site, the next order of business is to discuss the existing single-family home at 141 Portanimicut Road. John, do you want to start that conversation, or do you?
I think it's we need to circle back and talk about the house on the site. We at our last meeting we had the benefit of Russ's expertise and a couple of site sketches for parking. And we've worked through now twice some of your preferences for uses on the conservation property going forward, a lot of which didn't involve the building. So, and then it was about two meetings ago that I let you know if there is a recommendation on the building, you might want to make that sooner rather than later, because there's no dedicated budget to deal with the building in the conservation office. So if anything does need to be done with the structure, I will need the assistance of other departments, and I kind of want to get some consensus out of this group. Maybe it's just a majority consensus, but some guidance out of the task force so we can maybe go make CONSCOM aware of kind of what you've been talking about as of late. So, that's just a rough introduction. And of course, now that you're starting to drill down and come up with kind of key things to do that might accompany the final report, that's a management plan. The building is going to need to be dealt with. It's like, so, and then also probably provide you some flexibility on site for improvements. And conversely, it might also provide you with something on site to utilize. So I do kind of need to know where you guys are coming down on it as a group.
Okay, so I think that, as John said, we've pretty organically come to consensus, and I would like to get things to the point where we can make an interim recommendation on the building to the Conservation Commission so that we can inform Mr. Kelly about any funding needs that we might have. And it would also allow us then to start to work and drill down on the site plan. Is there any discussion at this point from the members of the task force? Russ?
Phil, have you had conversation with people? You mentioned at the last meeting you were concerned about the limited site of the committee. Have you talked to anyone since then? Whoop.
Am I on?
Yes, you
Can you
are.
hear me?
Yes.
I've talked to a couple of people, Russ, but I'm not going to change. I've thought about this a lot. I'm not going to change my position about the building because I still think there's not enough time for other people in town to have input.
Okay.
So I just can't join the consensus at this point, and I'll have to be a minority vote on it. I feel very strongly about it.
Okay.
I'd like to speak to that. We've been meeting for months, actually almost a year, and I think it's been out there, public knowledge. So I think that if they really wanted to speak up, they've had ample time.
Okay. Jack, anything?
Yeah, is there, we've heard a few things about people who might want to use the building, and I guess Phil has said she hasn't heard anything other than what we've already spoken about. But because I'd like to consider keeping the lower level of the building. It seems to me that somebody, I mean, if there's a interest in putting an upweller on that property, it would be nice to have access to power and perhaps a place to store stuff.
Okay.
And I wondered if anybody is interested in saving the lower level, deck the whole thing over. I mean, take the house itself down and then deck the whole thing over, and leave the cellar available further down the line. I think it would save a little bit of money in that it wouldn't require any landscaping. We wouldn't have to change anything on the site itself in terms of landscaping. And there's somebody out there that will come forward once it appears that something is actually happening on that site.
Well, I'll speak to that. The first thing I think I'm going to say is that our process has been transparent and according to the way that the committee was constituted. And we have been meeting since March with multiple opportunities for input and pleas sometimes that people get in touch with us. There have been some people who want to keep the building, but no one's come forth. There's been no proposal, no friends of 141. I'm opposed to keeping the foundation for the following reasons. First of all, it's a small site that I believe needs to add to coastal resiliency opportunities, and therefore having an impervious surface there does not align with my vision of the property. And I'm going to stop right here because I see that we have Alan McLennan on the line, and I'm just going to say good afternoon, Alan. I also have concerns about liability with a deck on the building site. And Phil shared with us the other day that there has, as we believed that there had been shell fishing on the site, and Sandy McFarland has indicated, is that correct, that there has never been an upweller on the site?
To her knowledge, yes, they had talked about it and then it fell through for various reasons.
And one of the things that keeps coming up is that there should be an upweller on the property and the storage in order to provide less expensive spat for commercial shell fishermen. But that is not an allowed use of the property. It would only be allowed to have an upweller on the property if it were being used in a way that promoted conservation interests. Did I state that correctly, John?
Yeah, sort of,
No,
you could probably stretch it to creating some nexus for recreational shell fishing though, Ginny.
That's
But I
possible.
think you did state
It would not be
you're correct on the commercial activity.
Right.
But in the event the activity on the conservation property supports a recreational activity, I think you have, I think you're allowed to be in that kind of role, but not supporting commercial activity.
And if I may just divert for a moment, we also discovered, thank you, Phil, that we can't prohibit fishing on the property. But we can mitigate for the issues that have been discussed. Anyway, who else from the task force would like to weigh in?
Jenny,
Yes. Is
I
that
just want to clarify that I don't think anybody's talked about putting on an upweller that would benefit the commercial fishermen. It would be a town propagation effort put out for the benefit of everybody. And if we did oysters, there's no commercial harvesting of oysters in our town anyway. So that's just a clarification.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
I'd like to say a couple things. So first of all, the cost of maintaining any part of the building is a lot more than $204 because there's a lot more than water and electric. And we have to think about where the septic is, what that's going to cost if that fails, get it pumped out every 3 years. There's just a lot more to an ongoing cost than $204 a month. And then I'd have to go, and now that commercial fishing is out, I'd have to go the other. If we had the upweller and we're doing the oysters or whatever, what percentage of our taxpayers will actually benefit from that, as opposed to the percentage of taxpayers that would benefit from a park area, beach area, kayaking, swimming, fishing, anything like that. I think that anybody and everybody would benefit from that, as opposed to the few that would actually go out and get oysters.
Okay, thank you. Russ, do you want to weigh in?
I kind of go along with Kayleen's sentiment.
So am I hearing that, what I think I'm hearing is that Phil wants to keep the building. Jack is advocating to keep the basement, and that Kayleen, Russ, and I want to take the structure down in its entirety. Is that where we are right now?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to open this up, and I believe that Alan McLennan might want to say something. Alan, would you like to speak?
And Ginny, while Alan's unmuting, there's also a call-in attendee who can raise their hand, and we can allow that person to speak when ready.
Okay.
Uh,
Yes, go ahead, Alan.
Members of the task force, I'm sorry, I was a little late trying to find you online, but I made it. I did hear somebody say that no one has come forward to talk about the building being reused.
I think what we said was that there have been people who talked about the building, but no one has come forward with a plan.
Okay, let me just ask you, we have an incredible affordable housing crisis in this town. Have you asked the Affordable Housing Trust or the Affordable Housing Committee if they have any interest in the building for workforce housing?
I'm not sure that's an allowed use. Is it, John?
It's a pre-existing use.
It is a pre-existing use, and so early on in our meeting, I circulated Chapter 8 of the Environmental Handbook that goes over conservation properties that have buildings on them. And there's guidance in Chapter 8, and I have it. I was going to bring it up for the handicap discussion today, but there has to be a nexus to the conservation property, Alan. And right out of Chapter 8, if you read the Chapter 8, it reads exactly like the model the Conservation Commission is doing over at Seacole Farm, with a caretaker that's responsible for maintenance and care of the structure. So perhaps I'll leave you with there's a possibility there, or a proviso, I would say, if there's a housing opportunity there, there has to be a nexus to the care of the conservation land. And I can share that guidance doc that I share with this task force and that CONSCOM uses for our land management efforts.
If you could share that, I will pass this information on to the trust. They're meeting on the 17th to see if they have any interest in proceeding in a way that would be consistent with Chapter 8.
Yeah, I can definitely share that, Alan. We'll do at the conclusion of this meeting. And also early on in the meeting, I reached out to, I want to say it was Habitat for Humanity, that had, I thought a site up the road and on Quonset Road.
Right.
And they did take a cursory look at the building, and were not interested in it at this time. It's not to say I couldn't reach out again. It's obviously a strong need for the community, and we could probably do that again. But if they're staying on site, you'll see when I circulate that document, there has to be a nexus to the conservation property.
Yeah, I'm just raising this, Madam Chairman, because we have an incredible housing crisis in this town. And it seems to me that we need to be careful if we go and destroy a 2 or 3 bedroom home that has been lived in up to about 2 years ago by one of the members of the family. And we need to ask the question, is that a viable use under the rules and regulations and guidance of the Wetlands Protection Act? I think that question has to be asked. I'm not saying it's a good idea. I just think the question has to be asked.
Okay, consider the question. Consider the question asked. Thank you. Kayleen?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Alan. There is a huge housing problem. However, if all of the taxpayers have paid for this, how do all of the taxpayers really benefit if one person or family is living in the home? And I get that you can still access it because it's public property, but really it's gonna like kind of hinder who really wants to go down there because someone's living there.
It's the same question that was asked at Seacole Farm.
Much bigger place.
Well, that's fine. Understand.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is, I think it's a question that has to be asked, because otherwise what we're doing is we're destroying something that has a value that might be able to be used under certain consequences. So if we don't ask the question, we're coming up a little short. That's all I'm posing.
No, I hear you. And another option would be to actually physically move the building to another spot.
Which is something that we discussed early on, that as opposed to demolition, moving it off site. It's in pretty rough shape.
Well, I'm not gonna, I don't want to get involved with that discussion because I don't know. I would just say that the boathouse that I'm looking at outside my house used to be on that property and it was
Yes.
moved.
I'm aware. I'm
Okay.
Yeah.
So I will bring this up at the trust meeting on the 17th and we'll see if anybody's in it.
You know, I guess I appreciate your comments, but we really are trying to move things along here at this point, because this was originally, you know, a short-term committee, and now it's been a year, and I'm just wondering if there's a way for you to do that before that date, because we were hoping to take this recommendation to the Conservation Commission for the 17th.
Unfortunately, our next scheduled meeting is the 17th at 4:30 p.m.
Okay.
Can't do it faster. So,
Okay,
okay.
Ross?
Ginny, our charge, prior to our charge in the sheet that John handed out, there's a paragraph, and one of the things that it says is the property was purchased by the town in 2016 for open space and recreation purposes. And our charge is to maintain that. So I don't see where turning this into affordable housing falls under the guise of open space and recreation.
Yeah, so, I mean, I just sent Alan the chapter 8, but you guys should all have it. And it's kind of a key, I mean, when you see the copy that I circulated, whenever it was, with one of your packets months ago, you see how marked up it is. You see how much I refer to it. And it uses words like such, when it talks about existing buildings for that are on conservation properties that a municipality acquires. It uses words like such structures may be used for activities related to the primary conservation purpose of the land, e.g. storage of farm equipment or a farmer leasing part of the land. And then it goes on to say the CONSCOM may lease some of the space in terms of exchange for services that support the conservation use of the parcel. And that's kind of the model that the Seacoast supporters pitched to the CONSCOM and that we instituted over on Tonsa Road, where they provide care for the grounds. So you guys have this, and I just shared it with Alan, so he has it in his email now. But it's a guidance doc, and any new ideas that are that may stretch the boundaries of it can also be checked with town council at the commission level. If you want to see fit to make a recommendation for type of use, we would need to do that due diligence. But it's a good read, and I was going to bring it up again today with handicap accessibility, but definitely go back over it as if you don't act today, or if you're acting today, or let me know.
Okay. Jack, do you want to weigh in on this?
On the housing use,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I don't think that it would be appropriate. I mean, I understand the way it was done with C-Call, and that continues to make sense to me. But I don't see, because of this site is so small, I don't see how the connection could be made. Doesn't mean it couldn't be. It's just that I'm not creative enough to do it.
All right. And what, you know, one of the things I'm thinking about now is that the additional parking that was high priority for everybody would go by the wayside, or it would eat into the open space that was available. I'm very sympathetic to the need for affordable housing. I don't think this site supports that, the chapter, in that there's no maintenance beyond a mowing or two. And but I have no objection to having the house moved if it's a viable structure. Phil, do you want to weigh in on that?
I tend to agree that that's not the best site for affordable housing. And that is, affordable housing is something near and dear to my heart. And I spent a lot of my professional career working for lower income people, and I've been homeless myself and everything else, but I don't think having a family living there would fit in with some of the other things we're trying to do. So I tend to agree with Kayleen that the place is too small. If the house can't stay, I'd certainly rather have it moved somewhere than demolished, though, as a second choice.
Yeah, I think that many of us did feel that way, that if someone was willing to do that. Alan, how do you feel about that? I don't think it's going to meet the Chapter 8 criteria simply because the property is so tiny. How would you feel about looking into moving it?
I don't have an answer. I just sort of realized that today you were going to be talking about your final report. And I woke up.
Actually not. We're talking about an interim report.
Well, and your agenda talks about use of the house. And so I spotted that and I said, wait a minute, no one has ever come to the trust, or I don't think anybody's been to the housing committee. I need to go to you and say, if you're talking about the building, let's make sure at least that use is on the table. You have the absolute right to say it doesn't work. My role was to be the messenger. And then I can't do anything other than mention to the trust on the 17th that I came here and raised it as an issue. The choice is yours. I just, as a planner, I want to make sure that all the options are on the table and discussed and disposed of appropriately.
And I think that's fabulous. Yeah, we have discussed the house starting in, when did we start? February? At every meeting, and have talked about it some in terms of not affordable housing, but was it a livable space, a viable space? Could it be used for the harbor master? And the one thing I think we all agreed on was that if someone wanted the house, it could be moved, but that the site is very fragile and doesn't really support a residence on the site. But I don't know exactly how to proceed at this point.
You should proceed just the way you're proceeding.
Yeah.
All I'm going to do is raise the issue with the trust on the 17th. They may say, Alan, you're crazy. Don't waste any more time with it. I have an obligation to let them know because we are in the process of removing from the inventory of the town of Orleans a 2 or 3 bedroom house. And now it's costing Habitat $525,000 to build a 2-bedroom house up on Quonset Road. We may throw one away. So that's the only reason I raise it.
Well,
Madam Chair, nothing's going to happen to this house between now and November 17th. I mean, let's do the work. So, so what Alan stepped into today is that, you guys have been kind of working these potential future land uses through, matrix and scoring and ranking and trying to drill down to what you're going to recommend to CONSCOM the property ultimately be used for, or its highest and best use consistent with open space conservation and passive recreation. So, and I'll bring Alan up to speed as you work through that. A lot of those high ranking recommendations that I know you're going to make did not involve the building. So the building is almost in your way of fully developing some of those ideas and concepts. However, so I guess that doesn't play to Alan's request of perhaps a caretaker situation. Certainly the size and the nature of the land and the lack of a big landscape to care for kind of discourages against that kind of land use here. But we can certainly check in with them to see if they have any interest in the dwelling, and we can be a active participant to hopefully facilitate the reuse of it in lieu of tearing it down if that's its ultimate fate. So I don't think we need to not try to do that. So if you don't make, so I don't know, I'm thinking now, but like, why not see if they have any interest at all? I mean, I informally checked, I think when I called Habitat, Alan, it was like the foreman that came down to look at the structure. And I'd have to chase down that name to even tell you who it was. But I was with the help of George that we did track down a contact person for the Quonset Road project. So, but but since then, of course, we some of you don't know that we have a housing trust that has some capacity to now do projects. And so it's a great idea to let them know that we have this building down here that you're considering making a recommendation on. I think your minds are made up on the actual having like a tenant on site, caretaker on site, but you can let me know if they're not.
I don't see a role for a caretaker on site. There are competing priorities. One of the priorities is to try to alleviate traffic down there. And I don't know how many trips a family in and out of the driveway is. I used to know that number. Alan, what's the average number of trips in and out?
And
John is saying 10. I lived in a more inner area. It used to be 5.5, but somewhere between 5 and 10.
they call that 10 home-based trips.
You're right.
Thank you.
That's not to be confused with non-home-based trips.
What
or
was the
work-based.
number? I just couldn't remember what it was.
Well, every person at this meeting needs to think about and count the trips in and out in their car each day. And then next month, when you come back, report. We'll know what it is in Orleans.
Mine is about one and a half a week.
Nowadays, yes.
Yes, nowadays, yes, not that many. So I think with the I think that the way we should do this is to put together the recommendation that we were going to make to Conservation Commission, which was a very, very tiny recommendation that would just allow us to move forward with site planning. Alan, if we make this recommendation, and I make this commitment as chair of ConsCom, because I'll have to chair that meeting, there is every possibility that Conservation Commission might want to delay and hear what has to be done, what the trust comes back with. I think that what I'd like to do is see if we could get a motion that would send a recommendation to Conservation Commission to remove the house at 141 Portanimicut. Could I get someone to make that motion?
So moved.
Jack, could I get a second?
Now,
Was that Russ? Was that you?
I'll second it, but I have a question.
Okay, we're going to have discussion. So it was a motion by Jack and a second by Russ, and Russ has discussion.
Is this complete removal, foundation and building?
Yes.
Okay.
Any
And it should probably be designated as removal either by demolition or
Move it.
other means.
My feeling is that it's removal is by whatever means.
Right, okay, that covers it.
Leaves it open. But I also think that we could, well, I have to present it, and so I can make that editorial comment.
Okay.
Be happy to do that. Is there any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to take a vote. All those in favor, Ginny Farber, aye. Russ Holden,
Aye.
Jack Kadzik.
Aye.
Did you say aye, Jack? I'm
Yes.
sorry. Okay.
Yes.
Suzanne Phillips. You're voting no?
You're muted.
Suzanne,
I'm
just
voting no.
no. Okay, thank you. And Kayleen Rosado.
Yes.
Okay, so that is 410 to send a recommendation to the Conservation Commission, which will be on the meeting of this agenda for the meeting of the 17th. Is that correct, John?
If you'd like it on that one.
John, but
I'd like it
are
on,
you gonna, is John gonna be here on the 17th?
Yeah, I'm not at that one. I'd much rather do it at the first where I can present it as the ex
Okay.
officio member. I mean, you
well,
gotta
then
chair
we
the
can
meeting,
have
so.
some more information from the Housing Trust. So that serves a good purpose too.
Yeah, so do you want to consider another motion, Madam Chair? Something that we notify the Affordable Housing Trust of your recommendation of the CONSCOM, and that see if they have any interest in the building at 141 Portanimicut Road?
I would entertain that motion.
Did you
Somebody,
move that?
Moved.
I'm not hearing, sorry.
I will make that motion. So moved, John.
Jack's making the motion. Could I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Kayleen, any discussion? Okay, hearing none. Ginny Farber, aye. Russ Holden,
Aye.
Jack Kadzik,
Aye.
Suzanne,
Aye.
okay. Kayleen,
Aye.
it's 500.
And I'll get a quick memo out to Alan's group as well, Ginny, as well as the CONSCOM. But Alan knows the final fate of the building will be up to the CONSCOM. You're making recommendations as a
Right, we're just
advisory
making
task force.
recommendations. Yeah, that's all we're doing. Along with that, under other business, old business, we talked 2 weeks ago about the site plans that Russ did for us with some potential parking configurations. And I'm wondering if we could submit those site plans, Russ, I guess I'm asking you, to the traffic and parking committee to get their feedback.
I can, and I'm going to do another option with the parking parallel to the road.
Okay, so maybe we'll wait until that happens and send those to traffic and parking, because I believe that's what,
Can I ask a question, Ginny?
yeah.
So, excuse me, now that you guys have, now that like we know the position on the building, can we ask Russ to like maybe bring back to this group some other, and for Alan and others listening, you guys scored parking high on your things to provide for on this conservation property. Can we ask Russ to work up some other like alternatives that we can check out? I mean, he's got the skill set.
Beyond parking?
Yeah, no, so we had the one at the last meeting, but based on your last vote, we could turn them loose and tell them, hey, try another alternative without the building. Because, I mean, you really just made a recommendation on that. That might free up him to have other ideas for accommodating visitor parking for the property.
Okay, would that be helpful, Russ?
Sure. I'll look into it.
And
But I think ultimately, yeah, going back to when we had the police chief in and Nate in, like whatever concepts you work up, if you have a preferred concept, I absolutely would recommend sending it over to traffic advisory
right, that's exactly what Chief
to
McDonald.
see if they like one over the other. I mean, they were desperate for anything you could do to advance parking circulation
Right.
that would help relieve the adjacent town landing use. It's not you know,
Right, and
it's an off-property thing, but it's any improvements you can make will probably help out.
And along those lines, I was thinking, and I hate to put this burden on you, Russ, because, but you do have the skill set, that on your site plans, there was no accommodation for dinghy storage. And perhaps once we take a look at that, run that through Nate Sears and see if he has comments on any comments. I also wanted to report on the RAC, that's Recreation Advisory Committee.
Jenny,
Yes,
Jenny, before we leave parking,
Yes.
two things are for Russ if he's going to work on the site plan. I think we are missing a bike rack for one. And do I recall correctly that you showed 5 parking spaces
he
and I
did.
thought possibly there was room for 6?
Yes.
Okay, so I just something I remembered.
We were also going to discuss whether one of those parking spaces would have to be paved for handicap parking. So we might need to find that out through traffic and parking.
Yeah, no, you're not going to have to pave it.
Or put down a hard surface.
Durable surface is usually the ADA thing, and we use processed stone at the other areas. And while you're rereading, I didn't put it specifically as an agenda item with the chair today, but you guys had asked about handicap accessibility, and your homework assignment should be to reread that chapter 8, just to make sure you're comfortable with the recommendation on the building ultimately. But also it goes over accessibility, and it's section 8.75 in that chapter, and there's no absolute requirements as I read this, but you might want to, if there's a trail, you might want to consider making it accessible. And then I can consult with Nate to see what he does for the accessible wheelchairs, but I know where we have those at the beaches, we also have storage for them, and this property might not have such storage. So, but I don't see it as an absolute. As I read this, it's more of we have to take it into account, and usually that requires the durable surface type stuff.
Okay. More investigation. So the Recreation Advisory Committee came before the Conservation Commission on Tuesday, and just to let you know what's happening there, because there have been questions about the kayak racks and administration and bike racks. They have negotiated a procedures document with Nate, and Nate was on the call on Tuesday, that spells out what his responsibilities are going to be, what everyone else's responsibilities will be. And the part that I was most pleased with is that they're going to do this as a very slow rollout. So it's not going to be 9 kayak racks that go at the landings next summer. It'll be 2 or 3. They'll figure out what the problems are and work on it. So I think, in my mind, that answers a lot of the concerns that we had. They're working very hard. I think that's all I had. Does anyone else have something that they want to discuss from last week? We've talked about Phil's discussion with Judy Scanlon about the fact that we can't prohibit fishing. We've talked about the house, talked about parking, revising the site plans.
Let's see. I'm
Yeah,
sorry, I'm
sorry.
good. Sorry.
Oh, okay, okay. So I have nothing else except to review the minutes. So I read the minutes. I did not find any need to edit them. Christina, as always, does a great job. And so unless there are other edits, I'll take a motion on the minutes.
Approval of the minutes.
Thank you, Jack. Second.
Second,
Thank you, Phil. So motion by Jack and second by Phil. Any discussion? None. All those in favor, Ginny Farber, aye. Russ Holden,
Aye.
Jack Kadzik,
Aye.
Suzanne Phillips, Phil,
aye.
and Kayleen.
Aye.
500. And if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Make a
One
motion to adjourn.
quick
Russ,
question.
yes.
Do we have to address Ginnia's her requests or her comments?
I think we did last week.
Okay. And we're
Or
comfortable.
2 weeks ago. I think they're being actively addressed.
Okay.
Can everyone consult the charge again too between now and our next meeting? Make sure we're not missing anything. I'm pretty sure from what I'm looking at, we covered most of it. And we can start bringing in a report of some
Okay.
fashion.
Yeah.
And then and I'm sure interested parties, either from maybe even Shellfish Waterways or other members of the public, like we had the housing folks in here today, we're going to put that memo on the 12-1 agenda of CONSCOM that, you made a recommendation. But ultimately, the final report too, we need to bring there as drafts so we can have kind of a public hearing with CONSCOM. So I'll continue, I guess, push it towards that. I'll work with you on that, Ginny.
Okay, that would be great. Are you going to be at that meeting, John? You're not, are you?
12-1, I'll be at 12-1.
But not our next task force meeting.
So yeah, I'll be at that one. That's on the 19th. Is
Okay.
it at all possible that Russ might have some sketch concepts for us to share and talk about? And if anyone needs to visit the site again to look at it before then, that would be a good time. Because I mean, this is kind of a next step. This would be a clean look at the site without the building for some planning of some of those uses you want to recommend.
Does that answer everybody's questions? Okay, so could I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Kayleen. Second,
I second.
okay, Russ. Motion by Kayleen, second by Russ. All those in favor, Ginny Farber, aye. Russ Holden,
Aye.
Jack Kadzik, Suzanne, Phil, and Kayleen.
Aye.
It's 500. Thank you for your time, everybody.